The Eliani invaders made humanity pay dearly every time they tried the giant gun thing. Now they were doing it again, and the alien scum were determined to make sure it would be the last. Ruthless warlord Primus had been terrorizing Earth's colonies for years, his advanced Eliani warships blasting human outposts into oblivion. Mounting losses left humanity reeling, morale crushed as the superior alien technology proved unstoppable. But down in a top-secret bunker, one man refused to let the Eliani win. Weapons engineer Russell Rice worked feverishly to design a space cannon on a scale never before imagined. A skyscraper-sized railgun to turn the tide with projectiles fired at near light speed. Most thought it was impossible. Earth's leaders saw it as humanity's last hope. Failure was not an option for Russell. This fight was personal. He still had nightmares of the day Eliani troops stormed his hometown, his family mercilessly cut down in a hail of plasma fire. Every day brought news of the aliens drawing closer to Earth, conquering more human worlds. Time was running out. Finally, a breakthrough. Russell's team test-fired a scaled-down prototype, blowing an asteroid to dust. Humanity dared to dream of victory, but their hopes were dashed when Eliani spies discovered the clandestine project. Primus vowed to hunt down and destroy the superweapon before it could be completed. Now exposed, Russell pushed his team harder than ever to ready Earth's greatest gun for war. The Eliani Armada was already mobilizing to eliminate this threat. When they arrived, humanity's mightiest weapon had to be armed and ready to fire. The future of mankind would soon be decided in an explosive showdown at the business end of a cannon. The Eliani were determined not to let the giant gun thing defeat them again. The Hammer of Dawn was humanity's last hope. In the top-secret bunker, Russell Rice and his team worked around the clock to turn the dream of a skyscraper-sized railgun into a reality. They pulled out all the stops, working tirelessly in shifts to piece together the gargantuan weapon. Engineers swarmed over scaffolding, welding massive components into place. Physicists pored over schematics, making final adjustments to the cannon's groundbreaking magnetic acceleration system. Russell coordinated the complex construction efforts, troubleshooting issues as they arose. He barely slept, fueled by a potent mix of drive and black coffee. Mounting technical challenges and dwindling resources threatened to derail the project, but Russell refused to let anything stand in his way, not when the future of humanity was at stake. Day by day, the Hammer of Dawn began to take shape. Its immense barrel extended high into the sky, a defiant symbol of human resistance against the alien onslaught. As news of the secret project leaked, media reports hailed it as mankind's best chance to turn the tide against the Eliani invaders. A glimmer of hope sparked in a war-weary populace. But time was running out. Primus, the ruthless Eliani warlord, had gotten wind of the human superweapon. He dispatched elite strike teams to scour human space, interrogating captives and burning colonies as they hunted for any clues to its location. The alien warriors were relentless, leaving no stone unturned in their search. Russell gritted his teeth as reports filtered in of Eliani ships entering the system. The facility went into lockdown, armed guards mobilizing to protect the Hammer of Dawn at all costs. Tension crackled in the air as the human defenders prepared for the worst. Primus's spies narrowed down the cannon's location. The Eliani leader grinned savagely as he massed his forces, preparing a devastating attack to annihilate the human weapon before it could be brought to bear against his armada. With mere days before the Hammer of Dawn's completion, Russell faced a terrible choice: wait for the final critical components to arrive and risk discovery by the Eliani, or fast-track untested systems to expedite the weapon's activation, potentially compromising its functionality at the crucial moment. He agonized over the decision, knowing that the fate of Earth could hinge on his call. As Eliani warships closed in on the facility, Russell made the gut-wrenching decision. He ordered his team to initiate an emergency activation of the Hammer of Dawn, overriding safety protocols. It was now or never. Warning alarms blared as the mighty cannon began to power up. The ground rumbled, the barrel glowing with an ethereal blue light, as unimaginable energies surged through its coils. Primus's fleet arrived in orbit, unleashing a massive bombardment on the human base. The bunker shook violently, cracks spiderwebbing across reinforced walls. Scientists were thrown from their terminals, scrambling for cover as explosions rocked the facility. The Eliani unleashed hell, determined to reduce the installation to molten slag before the Hammer of Dawn could fire. Eliani dropships punched through the clouds, disgorging battle-hardened alien shock troops. They stormed the battered human defenses, plasma rifles blazing. Russell's security forces met them head-on, and vicious close-quarters combat erupted in the courtyards and corridors. Men screamed and weapons fired, the air thick with smoke and the stench of blood. In the control room, Russell frantically worked to bring the Hammer of Dawn systems fully online. His fingers flew over the controls, eyes locked on the status displays. Sweat poured down his face as the deck lurched beneath him. Smoke filled the air, the shriek of tearing metal and blaring warning alarms assaulting his ears. The enemy was at the gates. Time was running out. Russell gripped the firing controls, his heart pounding. The fate of humanity hung in the balance as the mighty cannon shuddered, power surging through its immense capacitors. The colossal barrel took aim at the Eliani fleet high above, preparing to unleash hell. This was it. The moment of truth. Russell's finger tightened on the trigger, a prayer on his lips. He knew that the Hammer of Dawn was mankind's last chance. It had to work. It had to be enough to turn the tide against Primus's legions. The future of Earth would be decided in the next few seconds. Russell's head pounded as he lay sprawled across the shattered control panel. Blood dripped from his broken nose, pooling on the cracked display screens. The acrid stench of smoke and ozone filled his nostrils. He blinked, struggling to focus through the haze of pain. Primus loomed over him, alien eyes gleaming with cruel triumph. The Eliani warlord's troops swarmed the command center, their sleek armor gleaming under the flickering emergency lights. Outside, the bombardment continued unabated. The facility shuddered with each impact, dust and debris raining down from the ceiling. "Your pitiful resistance ends here," Primus snarled, gesturing to the carnage around them. "The Hammer of Dawn will be nothing but scrap when we're finished." Russell's mind raced, grasping for a way out. His gaze fell on the main power conduit snaking across the floor, pulsing with energy. A desperate plan began to form. He spat blood and glared up at Primus. "You haven't won yet, you alien bastard!" With a surge of adrenaline, Russell lunged for the exposed wiring. His fingers closed around the cables just as an Eliani soldier's boot slammed into his ribs. Pain exploded through his chest, but he held on. Primus's eyes widened as he realized Russell's intent. "Stop him!" But it was too late. Russell yanked the cables free, unleashing a torrent of raw energy. Electricity arced across the room in blinding flashes. Eliani troops howled as the surge caught them, their armor systems overloading in showers of sparks. The Hammer of Dawn systems went haywire. Monitors flashed with error messages as failsafes were bypassed. The massive cannon began to pivot of its own accord, its barrel swinging wildly. "What have you done?" Primus roared, staggering back from the maelstrom of energy. Russell grinned through bloodied teeth. "Given Earth a fighting chance." Outside, the hammer's main barrel locked onto a new target, Primus's orbiting dreadnought. Energy built to catastrophic levels, the cannon's safeguards completely disabled. The air itself seemed to ignite as the Hammer of Dawn fired one final devastating shot. A lance of pure destruction lanced upward, punching through the clouds and striking the Eliani flagship dead center. The Titanic vessel's shields collapsed instantly. The hyperdense projectile tore through deck after deck before detonating deep in the ship's core. For a moment, the dreadnought hung motionless in the sky. Then it split apart in a cataclysmic explosion that lit up the atmosphere like a second sun. Primus howled in rage and disbelief as his prized warship disintegrated before his eyes. Shockwaves buffeted the planet's surface, shattering windows for hundreds of miles. In the control room, systems overloaded in cascading chain reactions. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks. The floor buckled as structural supports gave way. Russell lay motionless, energy arcing across his body. He'd done it. The Iliani fleet was in disarray, their command structure shattered. He only hoped it would be enough to turn the tide. As darkness closed in, Russell's last thoughts were of Earth. He'd given humanity a chance. Now it was up to them to seize it. Russell blinked, his vision blurry from the blood trickling down his face. He pushed himself up on shaky arms, surveying the destruction around him. The control room was a disaster zone, twisted metal, shattered screens, and sparking wires everywhere. Through the haze of smoke, he spotted Iliani troops swarming over the Hammer of Dawn. Their alien forms moved with purpose, attaching devices to key systems. Russell's stomach dropped as he realized what they were doing. "No," he muttered, spitting out a mouthful of blood. "Not gonna let you bastards take her down." He scanned the room, searching for any chance of fighting back. The main console was a smoking ruin, but a flicker of light caught his eye. In a far corner, partially buried under debris, an auxiliary terminal still glowed faintly. Russell's mind raced. If he could reach that terminal, he might be able to reroute systems and wrest back control. But with Iliani everywhere, how could he possibly... A thunderous explosion rocked the facility, making even the alien soldiers stumble. Russell seized his chance. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he lurched to his feet and sprinted for the nearest Iliani. The alien never saw him coming. Russell slammed into it with all his strength, driving his fist into its skull. There was a sickening crunch, and the Iliani crumpled. Russell snatched up the fallen plasma rifle, whirling to face the others. Two more Iliani turned, raising their weapons. He was faster. The rifle bucked in his hands as he unleashed a barrage of energy bolts, cutting them down in seconds. Alarms blared to life, but Russell was already moving. He dove for the auxiliary terminal, fingers flying over the flickering screen. Lines of code flashed by as he accessed emergency protocols, desperately trying to lock the Iliani out of primary systems. Plasma bolts sizzled past his head. Russell ducked lower, continuing to work even as return fire chewed up the area around him. He could hear the Iliani shouting, their alien voices filled with fury. The hammer's massive barrel began to move, grinding as it responded to Russell's commands. He poured everything he had into overriding safeties, shunting power to the main capacitors. Warning messages flashed across the screen, but he ignored them all. The ground shook as Iliani ordnance breached the outer walls. Russell's fingers never stopped moving. Almost there. Almost. He slammed his palm down on the firing command. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded into light and sound as the Hammer of Dawn unleashed its full, terrible power. The recoil threw Russell backwards. He clung to the terminal as hurricane-force winds tore through the facility. Through squinted eyes, he watched the sky turn white, Primus's flagship vanishing in a fireball that put the sun to shame. When it was over, Russell found himself in eerie silence. The acrid stench of ozone filled his nostrils as he pulled himself from the rubble. Somehow, against adversity, he was still alive. He looked up at the hammer's still glowing barrel. A grim smile crossed his bloodied face. "That's how we do the giant gun thing," he muttered to himself, his voice raw and cracked. His fingers danced across the battered control panel, bypassing safety protocols and rerouting every last scrap of power to the hammer's main capacitors. Warning lights flashed red, but Russell ignored them. He had one shot left, and he'd be damned if he didn't make it count. The floor shuddered beneath his feet as Iliani shock troops breached the outer defenses. Through the shattered view screen, Russell glimpsed alien forms swarming over the facility's rubble-strewn courtyards. Their plasma rifles spat blue fire, cutting down the few remaining human defenders. A proximity alarm shrieked. Russell's eyes snapped to the long-range sensors. His breath caught in his throat as he saw the wall of red icons approaching. Primus's reinforcements, come to finish what they'd started. "Come on, you alien bastards," Russell growled, hands flying over the controls. "Let's dance." The hammer's massive barrel groaned as it swiveled, targeting systems locking onto the incoming armada. Energy buildup warnings flashed across every screen, but Russell pushed past the safeties. He'd drain every last drop of power from this behemoth, if that's what it took. A deafening boom shook the control room as the first Eliani breaching charges detonated. Russell heard the screech of tearing metal as alien boarders began cutting through the hull. He gritted his teeth, tasting blood, and focused on the firing sequence. "For Earth," he snarled, slamming his palm down on the trigger. The hammer of dawn convulsed. Raw energy surged through its coils, the barrel glowing white-hot. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the sky split open. A lance of pure destruction erupted from the cannon, so bright it seared Russell's retinas, even through the polarized view screen. The beam lanced upward, punching through the atmosphere and into the void beyond. Russell watched, heart pounding, as the energy blast slammed into the lead elements of the Eliani fleet. Shields flared and failed. Hulls buckled and split. For a glorious moment, it seemed as though the entire alien armada might be swept away. But the hammer's power finally gave out. The beam flickered and died, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Eliani ships burned in high orbit, their formation shattered, but more pressed on behind them, unstoppable as the tide. Russell sagged against the console, utterly spent. He'd hurt them. He'd made Primus bleed one last time, but it wasn't enough. It could never have been enough. The sound of plasma cutters grew louder. Russell turned to face the sealed blast doors, knowing what came next. He straightened his back, ignoring the protests of his battered body. "All right, you sons of bitches," he said, voice steady as he drew his sidearm. "Let's finish this." The blast doors glowed red-hot, then burst inward in a shower of molten metal. Eliani warriors poured through the breach, weapons at the ready. Russell raised his pistol and fired.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.